Hello everybody, this is Nirup Sundar Mandal from Team UDAAN, and today here with us is someone who is a professor by day and a comic book reader by night, Sir William Kuskin from University of Colorado. Sir, please a brief introduction of yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. So, my name is William Kuskin, as you said, and I'm an English professor at the University of Colorado, Boulder. And Boulder is it's in the west of the United States, and it runs right up to the mountains. And actually, I liked your introduction because it suggested that I'm Batman at night stalking the cities of Boulder. But in fact, I'm an administrator during the day, and I've given up being an English professor. So it's given me great joy to be here teaching comics again. I haven't been in the classroom for about 3 years. So this has been a refreshing, kind of a rebirth for me, and it's been really wonderful.
Okay, so the very first question to is that why comics? Exactly, why are you passionate for comics?
So that is wonderful, and I'll say, like many people, I read comics when I was a kid, and comics were how I learned to read, and they really began my own voyage into literature. Comics and mythology together, which I think are a natural mix, especially when you think of kind of mythological superheroes like the Hulk or Thor, both of whom kind of they're so much larger than life that they bring us back into myth. And childhood is very much about imagining that world. So I went through a hard part in my life, and I'd become a professor, and I'd become a serious reader, and I'd put away all my comics and thrown them all away and given them all away. And then really, I guess it was 2003. I went through a really hard time, and I figured, what else did I have to lose? I might as well go read some comic books. So I wandered into a comic book store, and I found that comic books had really grown up, that even superhero stories had grown up, and they were dealing with much more complicated plots and themes. And around that time, a number of students began to ask me if I would just teach a comics course in the evening, just kind of almost a discussion group, but it was for credit. So I taught a course there, and one thing led to another, and I taught an online course, and it was free, and it was global, and ultimately 84,000 students took it.
Yeah.
And for me, that made me realize that comics belong to the entire world. Comics are for the world. So the power of comics is in the stories, but it's bigger than that. The power of comics is our ability for one person to sit down and draw and write and think through something that can reach thousands and thousands of people. That's so powerful.
So, professor by day and comic book reader by night. So, how do you manage your time schedule?
So, managing my time is tricky, to tell you the truth, especially because now I'm doing so much administration and I travel so much that it's very difficult even to keep up with comics. And comics are moving fast now. My colleague, Dr. Pinaki gave a wonderful talk now about how comics have this explosive force, and they're really evolving quickly right now. It's like if you imagine a curve of comics developing, they're really right here moving into this very high altitude move. So managing one's time is hard. I don't know if I have a great answer for that, because boy, email eats up a lot of time.
No, exactly. The social media nowadays. So, next thing, how do you recharge your creativity batteries?
That's a great question. It's funny because I very much love the classroom. And in many ways, the classroom itself is very recharging. To talk to people about comics, to see people make intellectual jumps that maybe they haven't made before, to me that's very, very recharging. But to tell you the truth, a little like Batman, I'm really an introvert by nature, so I very much need my alone time at night. And if I don't get that, I actually begin to get fairly crotchety and a little more like the Joker than like Batman.
Oh my God. My God. Okay, so next thing is that if you...
Your question was really good, because a part of making a comic is also a quietude. Who is it? Is it Alison McTell? One comic artist refers to butt-in-seat time. And really, comics, in the end, though they appear so heroic and colorful, comics in the end, it's about an artist's relationship to a page, and that's a very quiet relationship. And I think that tapping into that is incredibly important for anyone to unlock their creativity.
Nowadays, as you know, kids are more searching for superheroes in comics rather than those detectives and all other things, all other stuff which we have in comics. So, the two big superhero creators, DC and Marvel, amongst them, if you are allowed to choose one, whom would you choose and why?
Well, that's a great question too. You know, it's funny, I think that in some very deep way, Batman speaks to me, and I think he speaks to a lot of people. I think that in the end, what Batman is about, he's about how a child encounters something bad that he cannot understand, and it changes that child. And so, on some deep level, I'm a DC person, but you know what? I never read DC comics. I only read Marvel comics. And it's interesting too because DC comics continually make great graphic novels. Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns. There's a number of really, really great DC superhero graphic novels. Marvel, not so much. What Marvel does is individual stories that are great, and now I think Marvel's proven that it can translate that into the movie world really effectively.
So, asking about the life of a comic book creator, what are the pros and cons behind it?
I think anyone who commits to a life of art and being an artist is in for a rough ride because you have to give up a lot. You have to devote your time to your art, but you also have to realize that making your art really probably isn't going to make you famous. A lot of people work day jobs in restaurants or have a career and make comics and are really comic artists, right? I mean, if you make a comic, you're a comic artist. It's not the fame and fortune that if we see a few people get that defines what a comic artist is. A comic artist is someone who makes a comic and puts it down on paper and gives it to the world. So it's tough being a comic artist.
So, any valuable suggestions to our young creators?
My suggestions are that you can do it. You can make art. Now, your art, in the end, you may decide that comics aren't the art you want to make. But life is long, and if you commit, at least at some time, to expressing your imagination, you will reap incredible rewards for that. And you know, you may go on and you may be a father or a mother, and you may find that eats up a lot of your time. But at some point in your life, you need to pause. You need to pause and you need to say, what am I creating? What artistic statement? How am I using my imagination? And that is so important. It is refreshing. And it involves putting your own thinking first a little bit and going to a place where you can create something and making it and committing to it. That is such a powerful, important thing in life. I would urge everyone to set aside some time, regardless of where they are, whether they're a student, a parent, a grandparent, and create something. The power of creation is ultimately very healing and very noble. So I guess that's what I have to say.
So, speaking about life, you might have many special peoples, a string of special peoples in your life. So, if you were allowed to represent someone as a comic book character, whom would you represent?
Well, I've done a number of comics. I often make comics to weave them into my own classes. And the comics often tell the story of my classes. But one comic I didn't make, and I'm not an artist. I usually work with an artist. One comic I never finished was a story called Watch Out for Falling Rocks. Or it was also called One Thing After Another, because the rocks kept falling. And there was one thing after another. And we started, it was a story of my daughter and I. And the artist drew a wonderful representation of my daughter, but he never finished it. So I guess that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to finish that story of my daughter.
So, last question. Did you like UDAAN Season 6 magazine?
I loved it. It was great.
Oh, wow.
I read it through. I loved it. And I think Batman showed up in there, didn't he?
Yep.
Yep, I loved it. It was great, and that's why I'm here. And I have to say, my experience entirely at this university has been greatness. It's wonderful. And the power that the students have here is great. It's great. They're learning, they're creating things. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And there's one small token of gift from UDAAN for you. So can we have it?
It looks like a comic book.
Yeah, it's a comic book.
Wow, that's great.
This is
Number one.
Nagaraj,
That's great.
an Indian superhero.
Nemesis of terrorism.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Nag here in India means snakes.
Great.
He takes the power of snakes.
I see. He's got a snake chest there, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
exactly.
This looks great. And what's the story of this comic book? Where did it come from? Wow.
So that's a suspense.
Where is it produced?
This is published by Raj Comics.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. That's great. That's a
Thank
great
you, sir.
gift. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We had a lot of fun with you, and we expect you here again.
Okay.
In India, in
I would
Bilaspur.
love to come back.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Onwards.
Onwards. Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
That worked out.
Yep. Really.
Good. All right.